One Alpena Community College instructor has taken his students out of the classroom and into the woods for an archaeological experience. And this weekend, the students hiked through the forgotten village of Bell. Archaeology instructor Don Barre wants his students to learn more on how the site was formed, how Bay became a ghost town, and later into a natural reserve area. By reading what's documented in history, Barre said the facts will come to life when students visit the site for themselves. Sitting beside me is Don Barre himself. Don, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. So Don, please tell us briefly, what are you doing with the students at ACC?
So recently we just finished our ACC Intro to Archaeology class. It was a week intensive. It was a grueling 8 to 5 every day from Monday to Saturday. So it was the first of its kind. In the past we've done a field school more oriented, and this time we really delved into the theory and methods that go into archaeology as a science and human study.
Well, for the summer, you're really doing a lot with the students. And I was scrolling on Facebook, we posted the story last night, and several people want to know, how was Bell Bay started? How did it become, how was it founded? Someone even commented that they have ancestors from the village.
Yeah, and that's a really common story. Bell itself kind of came into existence around the 1880s and the 1890s. As a lot with the same history as Alpena. We had the lumber industry going on up here, and there was actually a sawmill up by Bell. And so that attracted a couple people to go work with the sawmill. I think from our research that we just started doing, we found out that the majority of people up there were either vacationing up there or were working for the sawmill itself. So it's just kind of a nice history that really wraps up with what Alpena was happening as well, just a little bit more north in the Presqu'île area.
Now, Larissa Liska and I went there for Field Trip Friday, and I can see why people would go for vacation because it really is beautiful.
It's a gorgeous area, yeah, and especially the beach.
Yeah, and apparently there's a few fairy tales, like one woman who lived there wanted to go to church, but there was no place nearby. Yeah,
so we found out when we were looking at some of the primary historical research, when we were looking at it through the Alpena library here in downtown Alpena, that there was actually some grievances between the men and women in the area of Bell. I guess because of its small nature, there wasn't actually a church on site, so those who did go to the church had to go down to Alpena or other surrounding areas. And from what we were seeing, that the men were actually letting the women go to church, and so that was causing a bit of an issue, as could be understandable in those times. So yeah, there's a really interesting kind of history that's going on with that in terms of how that got. I'm not sure how they settled it, but I'm sure someone fixed it. So.
Now, one thing the students didn't do at the forgotten village of Bell was do any digging. You guys didn't do any of that because there were no DNR permits.
Yeah, so if anybody's been out to Bell, Bell itself is on DNR land, so it's kind of a public reserve that people can go enjoy. But anytime you're dealing with state land, federal land, things like that, you do need to get permits to do archaeological digs. It's basically their way of background checking you to make sure you are doing what you're supposed to be doing and using the proper archaeological methods to investigate, and you're using the proper hypothesis and questions to approach that site. So unfortunately, because of the timeline and what we were doing this summer with the class, it wasn't really possible to get that permit in time, but maybe next year we'll be able to have the time to possibly go out there and break into the ground.
Now, one thing that you were discussing with me earlier, Don, is that the students are writing an essay.
Yep.
And I know it's the summertime, but what they're doing is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The big part we wanted to do is, we spend so much time in class, and you spend so much time reading about all these things in the textbook. And I had a couple of my colleagues calling in from Australia and Turkey and Macedonia and all these different places to talk to these students to give them a real world experience of what it meant to be an archaeologist. But again, you don't really know what it's like until you go out into the site and you start looking around and seeing how this stuff kind of appears in nature, right? So we wanted to make sure that the students kind of could critically think about, okay, how is the site forming and what does it look like? And a big part of that was having the final part of the essay be talking about, okay, well, here's Bell. Let's compare to what we saw at the library, right? Look at all the information we knew about it by just doing an hour or two of research on it. And when we go out to the site, there isn't as much information out there. And our challenge was to have our students think, well, how would we create an interpretive site for it? There's a lot of history up there. There's a shipwreck about 460 feet off the coastline called Portland. And we wanted students to really think critically, how do we maybe incorporate interpretive planning? How do we do reconstruction? Do you create a historic association that would kind of help out the DNR and possibly NOAA with the sanctuary and tie this human narrative to the area? So that was a really big part that we want to do, because that is a big part of archaeology, is not just the digging, but how do we present this to the public, and how do we engage the public into the history that is in that area?
Now, Don, we are running out of time, but can you quickly tell us how people in the community can learn a little bit more, or where to find information on what the students are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to find out more about what the students are doing, you can always contact myself. I'm an instructor at ACC. The other big one is at the library itself. They have a lot of great materials there.
Don, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. We really appreciate it. We hope you learned a great deal about the Forgotten Village of Bell with tonight's special guest.